So now we're going to talk about what you would do with a web page once you've retrieved it in a Python program. Call this web scraping. And so web scraping or web spidering is the act of retrieving a web page, extracting the links from those web pages, making a queue of unretrieved links, and then moving on. And eventually the idea is if you had enough time, energy, bandwidth, and storage, you could find your way to most of the web pages on the internet that are point to or are pointed to by other web pages. And so you might have all kinds of reasons to scrape data. You might have a blog that you posted. You might have, who knows, maybe you put some data in a system. Maybe the system's being shut down because it's being retired. You can do all kinds of things. You could write a little thing. I was talking to somebody who wrote a thing to retrieve something and check, and then send a text when something changed. All kinds of stuff. Or you might make yourself a search engine. But be careful. Not all websites are happy about you using a robot to retrieve their content. Some of the websites, as we'll see, demand that you log in and they track what you do, and if they think you're doing something bad, they will shut your account off. Other websites will track what you're doing without you logging in, but then shut your address off. And so you have to be careful. You should read up. You should figure out what sites allow you to scrape them. Now I have some sites that I've set up that you can play with to make it so that it's legit. So parsing HTML is difficult. Some of the simple examples, you could probably write a regular expression or, certainly some splitting and some whatever. And what you would find is you would write that code and you'd retrieve your first 5 web pages and it would seem to work, and then it would encounter some really weird but legitimate HTML. Or maybe even sort of slightly broken HTML. So the web is full of broken HTML, and your browsers just look at it and go like, oh wow, more broken HTML. But they don't put up error messages, and so people just leave broken pages up. But your Python program is going to see those broken pages. So what you would do is you'd be like, oh, here's a new weird way to do an anchor tag. I'll change my code. Oh, and then run for another 100 pages and like, oh no, here's a new weird way to do an anchor tag. And the problem is that you're going to find a lot of different ways to mess up an anchor tag. And someone has already done that. There's a software called Beautiful Soup, and we have installation instructions on how to use it. And really what it is it's somebody just spent months figuring out all the nasty things that could happen and compensated for it and gave you a nice wrapped interface that just says, look, you give me the HTML and I'll give you back the tags, okay? And so it's called Beautiful Soup. And so you have to install this. There's a couple of ways that you can install this. If you're good at extending your Python, you can just, extend and install Beautiful Soup for all Python programs. If you can't change your computer's configuration because you're on a school computer or you're using a USB stick or something, then there's a way to download this file that I've created called bs4.zip. And so what you do is you end up with your file called, URL links.py, and then a little folder called bs4, which is a folder that has a bunch of files in it from this zip file. And then you can run it. And so it'll pull it in, and you'll import from bs4 Beautiful Soup, and that's either going to pull it in from the folder you do, or if you have installed it using the Python installer, it will also you don't have to put this file in. So it's up to you. You can either do it one of 2 ways. So this is a little bit of code. Now Beautiful Soup is a complex library, and so just because this looks easy, doing things in Beautiful Soup, you might have to actually read a bit more to figure it out. But we're going to just read this. We're going to import Beautiful Soup. We're going to ask for a URL right here. We are going to take that URL. We're going to open it. URL open. They give the URL and read the whole thing. That means we're not writing a loop. We've read the whole thing. That's okay as long as you know that the file's not so large. And then we're going to pass the data we got back. And this is going to be bytes, but Beautiful Soup knows all about bytes and all about UTF-8, and it figures that out. And you just say, hey, take that stuff I just got and tear it apart using HTML and give me back an object, a soup object. Now the soup object is something that you can run queries against. So it parses it, it deals with all the imperfections and inconsistencies in this HTML byte array. And it fixes that and gives that back. And so there's various things you can do, and you got to go look at the Beautiful Soup documentation. It could be a whole class on Beautiful Soup. So here's a thing you can do, is this object you can sort of call it like a function and say, hey, give me back the anchor tags. And anchor tags, of course, are the tags that say href equals blah, blah, blah /a. So all of this is an anchor tag. And then we're going to loop through the tags because there could be more than one of those anchor tags in the file. And then we're going to pull out that href. And that's what this does. We're going to loop through all the tags and print out the href. So if you tell it to go to drchuck.com, it will show you the one external link in drchuck.com. And so I've got an assignment that sort of goes into that in some more detail. But this chapter has been a whole bunch of interesting stuff. We started with the TCP/IP model and talked about sockets that are phone calls between computers, and then how applications protocols are developed to say what we say on those phone calls. And we've explored then the HTTP protocol, which is probably the most likely thing you're going to see. And then we played with all this in Python and saw that Python is really good at this. You can write extremely simple and small programs to do some extremely complex and powerful things. And again, that's why people like Python, is because it makes the complex simple.